Okay, so welcome again. My name is Shelby Bates. I work for IN Pathways to Inclusive Higher Education, a nonprofit that advocates for college access for students with intellectual disabilities. Today, we are talking about the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. One of the things that I find a lot is that families might not really know, like, how to use services with DVR either before college, maybe during college, or even after college. So, hopefully, this will kind of give you a sense to learn more about DVR and ask questions you have. I will be monitoring the chat box, so you can definitely put questions there. And then at the end, if we have time and anyone wants to ask a question out loud, I think that we could do that as well. Our speaker today is Darby Remley, who is the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Supported Employment Coordinator and Trainer for Colorado Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. She has been involved with the inclusive higher education community of practice between our organization, DVR, and the colleges who currently offer inclusive services to students with ID in Colorado. So we're super grateful for that. And that's been just really nice to have kind of DVR and inclusive higher ed people talking. And she also brings with her just a lot of experience and understanding of a wide range of services that DVR offers. If you submitted questions in advance, Darby has some of those in the presentation. And if we miss anything, again, feel free to put those in the chat. So I think that's all I have for an intro. And I will now mute and turn it over to you, Darby.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for having me. So like Shelby said, I am the IDD supported employment coordinator and trainer with DVR. So really my role is to train all of our DVR counselors that work with our IDD population. And then I have a cohort that works more with our mental health side of things. And together we just support all those counselors that provide any sort of supported employment service. So I was a DVR counselor for many years before coming into this role, and actually would support a lot of students going to inclusive higher ed programs. I'm in the Fort Collins area, so we used to use the GOAL program in Greeley, and so have lots of experience around inclusive higher ed, and just really excited to get you guys' questions and provide you with an overview of just who we are at DVR and how we can provide services. So just to start, I wanted to just go over our vision and mission at DVR. So our vision is we will be the premier vocational rehabilitation agency in the nation, working with businesses and community partners to promote the talents of people with disabilities to achieve meaningful employment and independence. We set a really high standard for our state and for the services that we provide to the individuals that we serve. And so it's our hope that we can really be a model state within our nation. For some of the services we do provide, things like customized employment and things like that, we really are kind of one of those higher standard states, along with a few states in our nation that really strives to provide the best services and that really high expectation of the providers. And then our mission, so we collaborate with clients to achieve success in their chosen occupations and independent living through our partnerships with businesses, communities, and workforce development system. So really when we think about how DVR services are provided and how we work with the individuals that we serve, it's really through collaborative partnerships. DVR definitely cannot do this alone. That's why we work really closely with programs like Inclusive Higher Ed. We work really closely with our local workforce centers, our Medicaid agencies, healthcare policy and financing. We work with the Department of Education and the schools in the different areas of the individuals we serve. So we just have a lot of different collaborative partnerships that we utilize when it comes to serving individuals. That way, we can really ensure that maybe if DVR can't provide a certain service, there's maybe a partner that can. So Colorado is an employment first state, and this is something that goes into every single service that we provide. And so really what employment means is that, and what DVR supports is that prior to opting out of a career, each and every person with a disability should be provided appropriate information, encouragement, supports, and services to learn how they can meet the business needs of employers. And so really what this states is that when individuals are of working age, employment should always be a part of that conversation when it comes to what kind of services do they want to access. Because here at DVR, we really believe that all people should be given meaningful, individualized opportunities to explore the world of work, to discover how they might contribute and chart a course to employment and greater prosperity. People who want to work deserve a path to opportunity, and then what they make of the opportunity really depends on them. So what we've seen a lot of times is that maybe just based on the severity of an individual's disability, or maybe their lack of employment experience, sometimes employment isn't even brought into the conversation when talking about services. And so really what we believe at DVR and really the whole premise behind employment first is that employment should be a part of that conversation from the time they are of working age. And so we really want them to always have the information they need about what employment is and what kind of employment services are available to them, so that they can really make that informed choice if that's something that they want to pursue. So as far as the services that we provide, everything is really person-centered. And when it comes to planning of these services and developing their individualized plan for employment, it's all person-centered. So at DVR, we treat everyone we serve with dignity, compassion, and respect. We provide coordinated care, support, and services. We offer personalized care, support, and services. And we enable our participants to the development of strengths and abilities for a successful employment life. So when you think about the services that we provide, everything is really to obtain, maintain, and advance in employment. So when it comes to the services, if we can justify why a service is required in order for them to obtain, maintain, or advance in employment, there's usually a pretty good chance that we can provide it. So, and when it comes to developing these plans, and when it comes to identifying the most appropriate services, the people we serve are really the ones that direct their vocational rehabilitation case. So our important role is just to support and empower them to direct their journey with informed choice. So we give them all the information they need. We can help them by identifying different employment settings, or help identifying the most appropriate work goals for them. But all in all, it really is all about the person. They are really the center of developing the plan, identifying the services, and moving forward with their employment journey. So when it comes to what DVR can support and the types of placements we can support, DVR can only support employment placement in a competitive integrated employment setting. So competitive integrated employment, or what we refer to as CIE, is meaningful full-time or part-time work at minimum wage or higher, with wage and benefits similar to people without disabilities performing the same work, and are fully integrated with coworkers without disabilities. So to satisfy this definition of CIE, the employment must satisfy all three components. So that's competitive earnings, the integrated location, and they must have the opportunity for advancement. So as DVR counselors are working with individuals and they're being placed into certain jobs, if there is ever a question that type of setting doesn't meet the criteria for CIE, DVR will conduct a CIE site evaluation. And so this is where the DVR counselor will work with the employer to ask certain questions to obtain this information. So they're asking questions about their earnings. They're possibly even going in and doing a site visit, so that way they can really observe if the location is integrated. And then they also ask those questions about advancement opportunities. So this is really a determination on DVR's part. if they feel that these placements meet the criteria for competitive and integrated employment. And so if for some reason these sites don't meet this criteria, DVR cannot support those type of placements. So they can continue to work with DVR, and we can help them pursue employment in a competitive integrated employment setting. But if they do choose a non-CIE setting to where they want to work, that would have to be supported. If they are on a waiver, that would have to be supported the waiver, as DVR cannot support a non-CIE setting. So this is our DVR roadmap. So this just goes into a little bit of kind of start to finish when it comes to the DVR process. So the first being just that initial engagement. And so that can be from the time the person is referred to DVR. We do have 30 days to get them in for an intake meeting. So during that intake meeting, we're going to be just getting lots of just clerical information on them, making sure their address is correct, good contact information. We're identifying who their support teams are. We're getting releases so that we can obtain medical documentation. And then we're also just kind of going over DVR's rights and responsibilities. The individual will receive a handbook during that meeting. So that's just really kind of a clerical meeting during that intake meeting. And so then once the person is found eligible, that's when we really start diving into looking at identifying a job goal and identifying services. So from the time an intake meeting occurs, we do have 60 days to find them eligible. The reason we give ourselves those timelines is because sometimes obtaining medical documentation isn't the easiest thing. And so we do give ourselves up to 60 days to be able to obtain that medical documentation that lists disability. And so if we're able to get all that medical documentation, we're able to find them eligible. So once they're found eligible, they will start working with their DVR counselor to start talking about those barriers to employment. They're going to go into what's called comprehensive assessment. And during that time, they're going to start talking about identifying job goals, what kind of services it's going to take in order for you to get to that job goal. So lots of different things during comprehensive assessment. So then from eligibility through the comprehensive assessment stage, we do have 90 days to get them into what's called an IPE, an individualized plan for employment. And again, those 90 days, those can take longer than that if we're just not able to identify a job goal, or we're not able to identify service providers, those kind of things. But a lot of times it doesn't always take that 90 days, because as long as the individual is really an active participant in their DVR case at that time, we can usually develop those plans pretty quick. So once the DVR plan is developed and finalized, that is reviewed with the individual. They're agreeing to all the services are being fully explained to them, and then services can officially begin once that plan is signed. And so those services can be lots of different things. We have a ton of services through DVR. Everything is so individualized, so those services are going to be very different for every single person that we support through DVR. And that's all going to be explained during that comprehensive assessment stage when you're identifying what services are needed. So our hope is that by providing those services, we then move into a job. And so then once they're on their job, once they work their first 5 shifts or 3 weeks, we consider that officially placed in their job. And so that's when we put them into a placement status in our case management system. And then once they're working on the job for a while, they have support through a job coach. They're doing really well at the job. And let's say their job coach is reporting that they're doing really good. They don't need a ton of services. They don't need a ton of job coaching supports. We would then consider that stability. And so once the whole team is in agreement of stability, that is when DVR officially has their services transferred back to their Medicaid waiver. This is for supported employment cases. It's transferred back to the waiver, and then the waiver will then support them for the next 90 days with their DVR case remaining open. And so over those next 90 days, even though DVR isn't the one funding the direct services, we do still reach out to them once every 30 days just to check in and see if they're doing well. And then at the end of those 90 days, if they're doing well and they still need very minimal services and they're being fully supported through their waiver, they would then be successfully closed with DVR. So the initial engagement, so just kind of starting from that very beginning, like I said, we just do that DVR overview and just get them connected to that local office. So that's when they were officially being referred. Then that intake meeting where you're just that clerical meeting, they're getting all the information. That's where they're going to officially meet their DVR counselor. And so when you think about that initial intake meeting, there are some things that would be very beneficial to bring during that time. So this helps to expedite that eligibility process. So like I said, from intake to eligibility, they do have 60 days to find the individual eligible. But if you're able to, some of the stuff is required to bring to the meeting, but some of the stuff, if it can be brought, it can expedite that eligibility process. So one of the required things is they do have to have a current photo identification. So whether that be a driver's license, the proof of residency, any of those legal documents that state that that individual is legally able to work in our country. And then a thing that would really help expedite the process is any medical records that you may have. So the doctor's reports showing disability, if they're connected with their community center board, if they have a service plan, that would be really beneficial because that lists disability. But we do require medical documentation in order to make them eligible for our services. We do have to state that a medical document was provided showing barriers to employment in order to be found eligible for DVR services. If you don't have any medical records, we'll definitely be getting some medical releases for them to sign that we would then send on to their medical provider so that we can obtain that information. If the individual does receive any Social Security benefit, having that proof of Social Security, that award letter off of the Social Security website can be really, really beneficial. That's a way to make someone presumptively eligible and can expedite that eligibility process even more. So having that proof of Social Security is also really, really beneficial. And then also coming with a resume of work history, having it with things like job titles, employers, dates of employment, contact information, stuff like that, that can really help to expedite that comprehensive assessment stage and getting them into a plan faster. Having all of that information can be really beneficial. So of this list, the only thing that's absolutely required when it comes to what you need to bring to an intake meeting, it's really that photo identification, but we're probably going to get releases from you, and everything else on this list will just be really beneficial to bring to an intake meeting. So as far as the DVR participants, so in order to be found eligible for DVR services, they must have a documented disability, such as a physical, mental, or developmental disability. That disability does have to create a problem or present a barrier of getting, doing, keeping, or advancing. And then after the DVR program is complete, the hope is that by providing these services that the individual would then be able to work, and then finally they must need our services in order to go to work successfully. As we're doing that eligibility process, if they have these documented disabilities, but then we're identifying that they don't present barriers to employment, they're able to obtain employment independently, they have all the skills they need to work in the field that they're most interested in, it's going to be pretty difficult to make them eligible for our services because we're not seeing that they even need our services to go to work successfully. But we also may be able to help those who have no employment history, maybe those who were previously employed but can't return due to a disability, including a disability related to recent illness or injury. So maybe those that in the past never had any trouble with employment, never needed employment services, but they now have this new disability that causes a barrier to employment. Those that are currently employed but are struggling to maintain employment. So maybe they've had a job, but now due to their disability, they're worried about losing it, or even those that want to advance in the current job that they have, but they need some employment services in order to do that. Those are those underemployed. So those that maybe have higher abilities and qualifications, but just need some assistance with advancing. And then those that are considered a youth, so both in school and out, and need support through work-based learning such as job shadowing, internships, job tours, etc. So here at DVR, we do consider the youth up to age 24.
Darby, we have a couple questions about the enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the first one is, does the individual have to be enrolled in public school to participate in DVR programming? Or what is the entry process for a student that is homeschooled?
They do not have to be in public school. We can open them in a full VR case. They don't, if they were a youth that was enrolled in school and maybe receiving services through their school, those are usually a little bit different of a case. We can offer some different services to them, but a youth that is not enrolled in a public school and we're not able to utilize any of those services through the school, we would just open them in a full DVR case if they're found eligible. And so it would be the same process, just getting connected with your local office, scheduling that intake meeting, and then during that intake meeting, that's when you're going to talk about all that information about them being homeschooled and what kind of services they have access to with a full VR case over being in a case that are primarily for our students that are enrolled in public school.
Great. And the second question is just, do you have a recommendation of what age someone gets connected with DVR?
So it's when they're interested in going to work. In the state of Colorado, from age 14, they are legally allowed to work, and so at DVR we can work with them from age 14 and up. And so it's really when they're interested in it and they want to make that pursuant of a job.
Thanks. Those were the two for now.
Okay, perfect. All right. So once an individual is found eligible, they meet the criteria from the last slide. Then we move into that comprehensive assessment stage, and that's where we're going to start developing the individualized plan for employment. And so during this stage, we're going to be looking at labor market results. We're really going to be looking at identifying the most appropriate job goal. We're going to look at what services are required in order to obtain that job goal. And then we're really, the ultimate thing that we look at is what we have here at DVR called our Big 8. So those are things like their strengths, their abilities, their interests, their capabilities, we look at concerns, anything that they're possibly concerned about when it comes to getting a job. And then ultimately, everything is really about informed choice. We want to make sure that as we're going through this comprehensive assessment stage, that this individual is provided with all the information they need to really identify the most appropriate job goal and the most appropriate services. So these services, they really, like I said, we offer a lot of different kinds of services, and it really varies depending on the individual job goal and need. So like I said, if we can justify that a service is needed in order for that individual to obtain, maintain, and advance in employment, we can really offer a wide range of services. So these services are really developed between the individual and their DVR counselor. So This all goes into that comprehensive assessment stage. They're talking about those different things. Some of our services do require DVR to look at other funding services. So if someone's coming in saying they need a medical procedure in order for them to work, or they need some sort of therapy, or they need transportation back and forth to work, and let's say this individual doesn't receive any Social Security benefits, we do have to look at other funding sources. Specifically for inclusive higher ed, we look at things like grants that are available. They always have to fill out FAFSA before we support any sort of higher education, and so those are all things that we do have to look at before we do support. And then when we do look at those finances and we take into account cost of living for our area. So if an individual receives Social Security benefits, they're exempt for what's called our financial needs analysis. And that form is where we basically look at how much an individual is making, and if that is under the estimated cost of living for the area they live in, then they would have no financial contribution, and DVR could fund the services needed for their job search. But if they do have an income that is above that cost of living, there may be a time where they would have to contribute financially to certain services. So again, if someone's on Social Security, that makes them exempt for any financial contribution. They can come in and receive at no cost any service that's needed in order for them to obtain employment. But if someone does have things like wages or is still claimed by their parents, we do have to look at the family unit. So we look at the easiest way to identify some of these is by just obtaining someone's taxes. We're just looking at that family unit, and then we're taking into account that cost of living. So there may be times where a contribution may be needed before DVR can fund a certain service. So again, that it's really all individualized. We're never going to know. There are some services that require us to do the financial needs analysis, and then there's some that do not. Any of our core set of services, so those are any of our direct employment services, so things like job prep and development, job coaching, things like that, those don't require us to look at finances. But like I said, things like inclusive higher ed or transportation, or if someone needs tools and books and different equipment for a job or a class, we do have to look at finances in that case if they're not on Social Security benefits. So some just examples of services. So especially for this presentation in this audience, really what we would look at if someone was wanting to go through an inclusive higher ed program, one of the services would be that formal vocational training. So whether that be at a college, a university, a vocational tech school, or an inclusive higher ed program. So we can support any of those if it is most appropriate for that individual. And again, just stressing that every single service we provide is individualized to that person. So during that comprehensive assessment stage, that's when the individual is going to be working with their DVR counselor to really determine if those services are most appropriate for them. And then if an individual is placed into a job, a service we provide is the job coaching and the preparation. So again, that's all one-on-one assistance. They'll be working with a job coach to identify the most appropriate job placed on a job, and then that job coaching. We can provide assistive technology. So we can provide things like hearing aids, computer programs, things like that in order for an individual to obtain and maintain employment. Mental restoration. So if an individual does require some form of therapy or medications in order to work, that is something that we can support if appropriate for that person. Physical restoration, so again, medication, OT, PT, prosthetics. We've purchased things like that for people. And again, really, when you think about our service, it all has to tie back to employment. Supportive services, transportation, interview or work clothing, and then those tools, books, and supplies that I talked about before. So again, some of these services that are on here, like the job coaching, those are our core set of services. We don't necessarily look at finances for those, but when you look at things like tools and books and sometimes that assistive technology and some of those formal vocational trainings, those are usually ones that we do have to look at finances for to determine if there is a financial contribution before we support. So a big thing that we really push when working with anyone who receives any sort of public benefit is benefits counseling. So anyone that receives any sort of public benefit. So it's not just those that receive Social Security benefits. We're looking at anyone who has Medicaid or Medicare, looking at people who have food stamps, TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, any sort of housing assistance, anything like that, LEAP, because that's all based on income. So when it comes to benefits counseling, this is something that we really drive home when it comes to individuals with public benefits, because they do really need to have all the information that's available to them so they understand how employment wages will affect their public benefits. Most of the public benefits are really based on income. So maybe they were getting them because they didn't have a job and didn't have any income. So now they need to know that if you do get a job and you start making this certain amount of money, how is it going to affect your public benefits? And so how that looks is we would get them connected with a benefits counselor, and they just sit down with them and they track all the public benefits they have. And then they run the numbers with them. They show them if they make this certain amount, it'll affect their benefits this way. They can basically tell them the cap on how many hours they can work without having their benefits affected. Or they can even help them look into, okay, well, if I work, I'm going to lose my Medicaid. Okay, well, let's look into other affordable insurance options. So there's lots of different things that benefits counseling does, but really it creates that clear, personalized plan for individuals to really alleviate those stresses and fears about what could happen to their benefits if they started working and started having more of an income. And then when you think about just the long-term supports, so when I had talked about how when an individual reaches stability, that's when we have their services transferred over to their long-term service provider. When it comes to individuals receiving supported employment services, so those are our individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities, those connected with mental health facilities. We're looking at those long-term agencies that they're connected with. So things like mental health centers, so they can be a long-term service agency. So even after their case is successfully closed with DVR, they can still be supported through them. Same with community center boards. And then also we really strive to have natural supports in place too, because you never know, something could come up, and we have a huge turnover rate for staff when it comes to providing our services. So who knows, their job coach could choose to leave one day, but if we had natural supports in place, their employer could easily step in and just support them naturally if they were kind of in a pinch to not have a job coach. And so really when we think about long-term supports, we really ensure that they have some of these connected, but then also we kind of have a backup plan of having those natural supports in place too. Right, so these are some of the questions that Shelby had sent me. So I'm just going to kind of go through these, and then, but then of course at the end there, I can take any more questions that anyone else might have. So the first question, what successes have you had with kids with IDD and ASD? So as far as the exact numbers, I mean, I definitely don't have specific numbers, but just from me personally, when I was a DVR counselor working with the IDD population, I mean, we served all different disabilities, ASD being one of them. But really what I have found is you're going to have the most success when placing an individual when the time is really taken to ensure that the right kind of job goal is identified, the most appropriate services are identified, and then really connecting them with an awesome service provider. We have some great vendors through DVR that work with the individuals that we serve to help them look for and apply for jobs, provide the job coaching. And so I feel like you get the most success when the person is really engaged and when the time is really taken to make sure that that individualized plan for employment is a direct reflection of what that individual needs and what their strengths and interests are that comes through with that job goal. So we've had lots of successes with this. And I don't think, I mean, I know ASD is at the forefront with a lot of individuals, but when it comes to just IDD in general, I feel like we have a lot of success when providing supported employment services, because we really take that extra time to ensure that we're identifying the most appropriate services for them and really ensuring that they're fully supported in their employment journey. How to enroll for services at 18. As far as enrolling for services at 18, if the individual is still connected with their school, if they are still in school, the school can help them by getting them connected to their local DVR office. If you just go on the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation's website, it gives you a whole map and it shows you where in your area is your closest DVR office. That would be the office you would want to get connected with. So either someone at school could help get them connected there. If they're connected with their community center board or a mental health agency, they could call and make a referral to the DVR office, or you can self-refer. The individual can call in themselves and schedule an intake meeting. A parent or any other support person can call in. I mean, we're a state agency. We're a service that's offered to anybody. Anybody can call in and make a referral for themselves. And then once collecting all the information, it's then determined if they're eligible for our service. But as far as just calling and referring, that can absolutely come from a lot of different ways. How can DVR help with services during college and before enrolling? Does DVR help to pay for college? So again, we can work with a lot of different kind of phases in life. So when an individual is 24 years and lower, so 24 to 14, they can access a lot more services beyond those that are 24 years and older. So when an individual is 24 years and older, we can only support one thing at a time. So if an individual was coming to me saying, I want to go to college, I could only support going to college if I found that most appropriate for that individual. Whereas someone who is younger than 24, if they wanted to pursue college and wanted to look for a job at the same time, I could support that, both of those things. But when they are older than 24, we can only support one thing at a time. And so when it comes to services during college and before enrolling, depending on the type of program that they want to go to. So if it is an inclusive higher ed program, the DVR counselor is going to work with the individual to complete what's called a justification for training. And so that's this big packet that's going to have them look at the different programs that are available out there, look at the different inclusive higher ed programs. They're going to look at labor market results. So the program that you want to go to, college for, are there actually jobs in our area for that training program? We do want to look at things like that, because if an individual is coming to me saying, hey, I want to be a marine biologist, and we live in Colorado, in a landlocked state, it's probably not the most appropriate thing to be supporting, because there's no jobs in our area for that. So, so we can help them by looking at different programs, identifying the most appropriate program for them. And then if we're able to do that, and we find it most appropriate for this individual, we can be there for them through their entire training program. So if they're found financially eligible, we can support things like paying tuition. We can support things like buying all their books and supplies. The individual does have to maintain at least a 2.0 grade point average for us to continue to support semester to semester. They do have to provide those grades to us every semester. And so the type of schooling that we do support the inclusive higher ed programs. We support bachelor's degrees. We support associate's degrees, vocational schools, trade schools, lots of different things we've supported. And so, yeah, so as far as can DVR help to pay for college, we absolutely can, if it's most appropriate for that individual. If they find a job, how long are job coaches provided? So when I had done that DVR roadmap, so it really kind of depends on the type of services the individual is receiving. So just kind of for this audience, if it is an individual receiving supported employment services, so once they work their first 3 weeks or 5 shifts, whichever one comes first, they're officially considered placed in that job. So from that time, we're going to be supporting them through job coaching, just really whatever they need in order to get them to what's called stability. So that's once there's no real set date on what stability is, because that can look so different for everyone. But once they're doing really well on the job, they need very minimal supports. Their job coaches reporting that they're not doing much with them. They're really independent. They have some natural supports in place. That's really what we identify as stability. So then once that date is achieved and everyone on the team agrees with stability, that's when we have their services transferred to whether it be a mental health agency or a community center board. And they're going to be supporting those services long-term. So once those services are transferred, their DVR case still remains open for an additional 90 days. And then even though we're not financially supporting, we're still there as just kind of a backup. If something happens and they need higher services than their waiver can support, we can just kind of step in during those 90 days. And so after those 90 days, if they're still doing really good and they're being fully supported through their waiver or whoever their long-term service agency is, then we would successfully close their case with DVR. But then do just note, we do also have what are called post-employment services. And so what those are is if let's say an individual is working on a job, they're being fully supported, but then a new task is being assigned and they need a lot more job coaching and their waiver just can't support that. We can reopen them in post-employment services, provide those just short-term services to get them back to stability, and then we would then close out their case again. How do I enroll my daughter? In this specific case, the family is connected to SWAP and is not sure how to see if they have an active case right now or if they need to completely re-enroll. So with this one, you can just you can either email me, and I'll have my contact information at the end of this. You can either email me your daughter's name and I can look her up in our system to see if they are still open. And if they are, I can get you reconnected with the DVR counselor that is overseeing her case. Or if they're not, I can send you the contact information to your local DVR office and we can get you set up to get back in for another intake meeting. Unfortunately, we can't reopen cases. If cases have been closed unsuccessfully, we can't reopen them. But if it has been closed unsuccessfully and you do need to re-enroll, it can usually be a pretty quick process, especially if it hasn't been too long of a time, because then they'll have her old case file. They should have all of her medical documentation if it got that far in her case. And so that process should go pretty quickly. can I use DVR services after I graduate from college? So with DVR, our hope is that we follow an individual all the way into employment. So if they're going to college to obtain a job, we are going to follow them through college, which is their training program, all the way into employment. So yes, we can absolutely, as long as there's active participation, they successfully complete that training program. Even if they don't successfully complete and something happens and they have to drop out of the program, they just want to pursue employment, then we can absolutely stop supporting training and just help them with employment too. We understand things happen in life. Yes, absolutely. After you graduate, we would follow you right into work, because that is why we're supporting the training, because we want to get to that point of successfully placed in a job. Will DVR assist someone with goals to attend community college or beyond? Absolutely. Community college, bachelor's and beyond that. We do, like I said, we do require that justification for training, which is something they would do with the DVR counselor. And that's really where you're justifying the need for this training. So community college, that one, that's usually we're almost always going to support that because that's a much shorter process. But when you get up into those bachelors and beyond, that is where we really have to be justifying why we're supporting something beyond that. We definitely want to make sure that this person has all the information they need. They really understand the length of these kind of training programs, and that they're not taking on something that maybe they can't handle. And so that's really why we do that justification for training with them, so they can really understand the scope of what they're about to take on. I have been involved with DVR. Do I have to enroll again? Again, same thing. You can email me your name. I can look you up in your system. If your case has been closed, then yes, we would have to set you up with your local DVR office and get you in for another intake meeting. But again, if it hasn't been too long of a time since your case was closed, they should still have all of your medical documentation to move towards eligibility pretty quickly. All right, so as far as getting connected with your local DVR office, so again, like I said, you can just go on our website and there's a whole map and it shows you all of our different 27 offices that we have statewide. So you can just find your area of the state and you can see what your closest local DVR office is. And you can just call the main number of that office and they can get you set up with an intake meeting. They are going to ask you just general information when you call in for that intake meeting, just to get you into the system. So things like social security number and date of birth and address, just so we can enter you into our system. And then they're also going to ask you things like, are you connected with a mental health agency? Are you connected with a community center board? Are you a student? That kind of things, because then they're going to ensure that you're getting connected with the specific DVR counselor that works with those types of caseloads. So like my caseload was working with individuals that were connected with their CCB and veterans. So anytime we had those intakes come in, they were specifically assigned to me. And so just know that if you do call in to make those referrals, they're going to ask you some of that information just so they can ensure you're getting connected with the right DVR counselor. So just to end with a quote here, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. So, I mean, I talked about it from the very beginning, just these collaborative partnerships. There's so many services available to individuals. It's just getting connected with them and then working together to really best serve these individuals. We don't expect anyone to have to do this alone. We're all here to support and really work towards that successful placement in a job that's most appropriate for those individuals. So this is my contact information. Megan Green, who is my boss and is our competitive integrated employment manager, she's on here also. Either of us are great forms of contact if you ever have any questions about anything. But that's all I have for you. And looks like we have some time here that I can take any additional questions that you guys might have.
Thank you so much, Darby. I really, really appreciate it. We do have a few more questions. So the first one is, my daughter is with DVR and has a job coach. How do we get an appointment with a benefits counselor?
I would just reach out to their DVR counselor and let them know that they're interested in benefits counseling, and that so what that would do is there's a few different benefits counselors that they can offer them. So they may send them some information to have you look through and read over the different services each benefits counselor provides, and then you can really kind of make the choice. But they also may know certain ones that have availability. I know there are some benefits counselors that aren't currently taking any active referrals, but the DVR counselor would be able to know which ones serve your area and that which ones are actively taking referrals too. So yep, just reach out to the DVR counselor. They can help you.
All right. And someone else asks, what about a 22-year-old who has had a dream of going to community college but doesn't know what they want to do?
Mhm. Yep. So that's what really goes into that comprehensive assessment stage. So they're going to research those different things. We have lots of different vocational assessments we can have them take. We can have them go out and do things like situational assessments. So this is where they would go into different employment settings and do the job and see if it's something they would be interested in doing. We could set them up with like work site observations. They could just go in and do some shadowing. So there's lots of different things that we can do during comprehensive assessment to really try and help them identify what type of program in community college might be most appropriate for them.
Okay, and the last one I see is, can a 22-year-old get services independent of SWAP? And this person shares they weren't particularly happy with the SWAP program.
Mhm. So SWAP can't serve beyond 21, so they wouldn't even be able to be connected with their SWAP or their transition services anymore. So yes, they don't have to go through the SWAP program. They don't have to receive any of those services if they don't want to. Again, they could just be connected with DVR, be open in a full VR case, and just be served through DVR and one of our DVR vendors. They don't have to be served under the SWAP program.
Okay, those are the questions I see, but there are still some people on. So if you all have questions, feel free to ask. I'm going to stop the recording. So if you want to ask your questions out loud,